Rinsing on a bag of chocolate. This is where my tap skills come in.
It's the Great Taylor C. Baker Show.
Hello and welcome to the Great Taylor C. Baker Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am baking my way through the Great British Bake Off technical challenges. Today, as you may have noticed, I've got a little crossover going on here with some fandoms. A huge primary ingredient in tiramisu is coffee. So I figured one of the best ways to honor said ingredient is with a Luke Steiner shirt from Gilmore Girls, because you need coffee. So hopefully this will add a shot of espresso caffeine awesomeness into our Mary Berry Tiramisu cake. We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you a special segment called How Big of a Gilmore Girls Fan is Taylor C. Baker? I am hearing reports that 2 weeks after this very tiramisu episode was shot, her friends surprised her with a special birthday present from a Gilmore Girls cast member. Oh, and my team's telling me that we actually have a clip from this event. Take it away.
Hello, Taylor. It's me, Sean Gunn. You might recognize me as your old friend, Kirk. Listen, Taylor, I think that your friends have learned something that you and I have known for some time, namely, whimsy goes with everything, which is why they selected me to give you this birthday message.
And here is how Taylor responded to that message.
Be good.
Moving stuff. If you are a fellow Gilmore Girls fan, be sure to comment below. And now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Grab your recipe, grab your ingredients down below. I have everything linked, and let's get started. So in America, we would call this a baking tin, but in Europe, apparently this is a Swiss roll tin. Really, you can probably just use whatever you have on hand. I think mine's like 15 by 10, and we are going to line it with parchment paper. Say it with me, parchment paper. The interesting thing is it says grease tin and line with parchment. And I tried this last time in my Florentines because I was using wax paper, it doesn't work. But now that I'm using parchment paper, we are going to test it out and see if you do in fact need to grease your tin and your paper. So if there's anything that's not covered by the paper, just doubly check. All right, so we have our tin greased, and now we are going to do step one, making our sponge, or as we call it, cake. But sponge is so much more fun. Sponge is so much more nope, that sounds like fungus. So we are going to do 4 eggs and half a cup of sugar, and we're gonna mix that up until it makes kind of like, meringue is probably the wrong word, but it thickens up. And one of the things I will continually try to learn is how to crack an egg with one hand and not drop shells on the ground. Okay, I got the crack part down, but then how do you open it without making... Oh yeah, this is doing it. Making our way to the half cup, down through the cups. Now we've got a half cup, baby. You've heard me probably say before I like to do heaping scoops. I'm trying to put less sugar and stuff, I'm sorry. As I have gotten older, my sweet tooth has changed, so I don't like super sweet things anymore. So I'm gonna stick to the recipe on the sugar this time, not go heaping. So we need to mix this for 5 minutes until it forms kind of like a stiff peak. So this is not meringue, because meringue is just egg white, and this is egg yolk and white, but it should make kind of like a thicker cream. Now this is just all the crossovers. I got a Fraser Cafe Nervosa cup, a Luke Steiner Gilmore Girls shirt, and Brandy. So this is not full-blown meringue trick, because in the meringue trick you want it to get so stiff you can hold it over your head and it doesn't fall out. This called for more of like a runny texture, but like a thick run. So now that it's reached its desired thickness, this is a pretty important part of making the batter, is folding in, new baking term, folding in the flour. And I was rewatching the episode, and this is where a lot of people make mistakes, because they're mixing violently, and you want to fold in the flour gently because it's something about the air and the way it distributes and how much the cake rises. So we'll see how well I can do this. We're going to use half a cup of flour. Sift in flour. Well, it said to sift it. I didn't do that. I don't have a sifter. So just slowly move it around until you no longer have little powdery tufts of flour in here. Okay, so I pour it into this parchment papered greased tin and smooth it out. There's something so satisfying to me without being able to scrape this and it look like it's clean on the inside. And now I want to level this out gently. And I can see the bubbles in it, so it should still get a nice rise in the oven. I'll let that sit for a minute, flatten out. I don't want to, if anyone's ever made macarons, you have to like hit the tin to push out the air bubbles. Don't want to do that because we want to keep the air in there, but I'm gonna let it rest for a second so it kind of naturally flattens out. All right, so now I'm pretty pleased with how this flattened out, so we're gonna put it in the oven. Bake well, young tot. So we're gonna bake that for 20 minutes. It should get a good rise, enough that I can slice it horizontally. We'll see. All right, so as we had already discovered, there's coffee in this recipe. So this says to boil water in coffee grounds and then pour in the brandy, which I assume means the coffee grounds would be in it, which I am gonna make the executive choice that if that's how that's supposed to be, I don't love chewing on coffee grounds. I don't like chocolate-covered espresso beans. So I made coffee and I'm just gonna mix brandy into coffee, which maybe I'll just have a sip of that while we're cooking. Then we're gonna mix that in to the creme de la creme of the tiramisu, the mascarpone cheese. So I'm gonna pour my freshly made coffee. I made maple breakfast coffee because I feel like every bake should feel like breakfast. And because this has coffee in it, naturally it means that you can eat tiramisu for breakfast. So it called for 3/4 cups of boiling water, so we're gonna do 3/4 cups of coffee. I'm gonna do a little more because I'm gonna try this. And we're gonna put in 1/2 cup of brandy. Now, as you can perhaps see, this has been opened. I had to taste test it. I actually got cognac because the lady at the store said it was pretty similar and that this was better than the brandy they had. I also learned when I was taste testing it with my husband last night that this kind of just tastes like really nice whiskey. So, yum. I really, gets on in your palate. Also, I just need to do this once again for posterity. Yes, I know that sound. All right, so let's try this coffee brandy mix. Ugh. This is gonna do it. It basically tastes like tiramisu, actually. I'm sure if the coffee were still hot, this would be a lovely beverage. All right, now we get to make the middle of the cake with the mascarpone cheese. This is in the fancy cheese section of your store. Don't go around to the cream cheese thinking this is gonna be with cream cheese. This is in the nice part of the store. The recipe was a little confusing when I read it, and I think I did not get enough of this, so I might have to skimp a little bit. So we are gonna put our mascarpone into the mixer and beat it until smooth. Break me off a piece of that mascarpone. Gonna get every little bit of this out of this tin. No cheese left behind. All right, so you need to mix this until it's a smooth, floofy cream, but we are going to mix in heavy whipping cream and icing sugar, which I think is the British way of saying powdered sugar. You know, it's funny that there's so much egg in that cake, it really just smells like a frittata is being baked. So we're gonna use 10.5 ounces of cream and only 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar, or icing sugar. Creamy, cheesy, not very sweet at all, which is kind of nice. So now we just have to finish for the cake to bake and cool, and then we can layer her up. Looky there. It looks like she rose, she rose. That's a nice looking sponge. You can still see the air bubbles. So we want to let it continue to cook / cool in the tin for 5 minutes. So I'm gonna let that cool. So we have everything made now. We have all the pieces to the puzzle. We just have to wait for the cake to cool to put it all together. So in the meantime, this is gonna be what I'm ultimately baking the final cake in. And it actually is done being baked. So after I put it together, it just has to chill for a little while. Ooh, I know how to do this. I know now why they do the crisscross. In the show, they do the crisscross papers, so you kind of pull it out like this. Yeah, I don't know if it's risen enough, because I'm supposed to be able to slice this in half. I might do a cheat and make the whole thing again, because this seems like an appropriate amount for 1 layer. I don't understand why in this cake we can't just make 2 of these. Why must we cut it in half, Mary? So our cheat second cake is in the oven. But isn't really a cheat because the bakers often remake their pastry. So it may be a little thicker than usual because I'm gonna, instead of slicing it in half, I'm just gonna put 2 cakes. But we'll attempt the slice just to see. But for now, we are boiling some water because we are gonna have to temper some chocolate. So I put some water on to boil, and for now I'm going to attempt to make tiny pieces of chocolate with a plastic bag and a can of plain peaches. And if someone gets chunkier chocolate than a grater, who's complaining about that really? Still a little chunky, but we'll fix it. So it calls for 6 ounces total of dark chocolate. And I might make a little more than it calls for because this is for the decoration on top, and I want to have fun playing with my decoration. But my water is boiling, so I'm going to temper. And you want to make sure that your bowl doesn't touch the water. But I still have a couple chunks in my chocolate, but it's getting melty. We're going to wait for this number to go down to 118 so it's cool enough to pipe. And I always enjoy/hate putting stuff in piping bags. So this is my first sponge. It smells like scrambled egg. So this is why we use parchment paper, because it actually is peeling off of here. Yeah, I don't have any idea how I would possibly be able to cut this way. And it didn't rise. I'm not sure why it didn't rise. It's still really bubbly. Maybe I overfolded it, but hey, it's still gonna have 4 layers, and that's what they're really looking for. So this one looks exactly the same. The 3 things you need to layer are the mascarpone mix, your shredded chocolate, and your coffee cognac mixture. Just mixing it up a little. We're gonna spoon that onto the sponge. So I'm gonna scoop this chocolate into a piping bag. Hope it doesn't all start spilling out the bottom. It's coming, I can see it coming down. I discovered the roll and fold is helpful. Well, I guess it's fold and roll. There's not a lot of chocolate here to work with, so. Okay, here goes, my thing fell off. Don't do that if you're making this for other people. And the liquor in this cup of coffee is very strong. Mary Berry would be very excited. So those are things that I made with chocolate and made a real mess with the chocolate. All right, so I have all the things I need. Step 1, get a large knife and cut a piece of your cake to be the size of your tin. So what you're supposed to do is cut your sponge in half horizontally this way. But mine just seems too thin to do that. Wish me luck. I'm gonna try to cut this in half this way. All right, I'm gonna get down in the weeds here. Oh my gosh, I just cut a sponge in half. Holy hellfire on toast, I can't believe that worked. So I didn't need to make my second sponge. Celebratory extra sponge bite. And we're gonna spoon out this. We wanna try to get an even mixture. All right, we're gonna start with that. And then we're gonna take some of this deliciousness. Seems a little thick in my tender sponge, but just gently spread your first layer of mascarpone. And now we need to sprinkle some of our chocolate mixture to give a little chocolatey fun in between the layers. Now again, this is supposed to be chocolate shavings, but TCB's version is chocolate chunks because I don't have a grater. So total, this is supposed to be 4 layers, so I'm putting the top half of this on here, which means it's actually gonna be pretty short. So repeat the process now. Coffee, mascarpone, chocolate. Yeah, you have to be careful because you're literally making your cake soggy, so it makes it really hard to spread this on here. Because once we're done layering this up, it needs to chill in the fridge for an hour, and then I'll probably just take it out and cut the edges and hopefully get these defined layers there. They all covet so much. It's the final layer, which I did 6 instead of 4 because I had a lot of cake and it seemed too short. So I still actually have a little bit of mascarpone left. So it says to really on this last layer, like generously apply it. Maybe try to make it look a little pretty because this is the showstopper at the top of the cake. So we're supposed to dust it. This is the only time the cocoa powder comes in. I don't have a sifter, so I'm just gonna take a chance and kind of do a sprinkling like this. Don't do this if you're ever going to give this to someone you don't know. The only person eating this cake is me and my husband, so I can do that. All right, so we are going to put this back in its little home, and then it needs to chill for 1 hour. I'll see you soon, cake. Enjoy your freeze. Alrighty, she has been chilled, and I have my decor ready, and my very large knives. It came out of the tin pretty easy, so that's exciting. It feels like one of those magic tricks where you're trying to pull the tablecloth out, so we're just gonna do that. Hey-o! Now, the only thing it's really missing is that clear defined edge that they really like. This is again why I suggested starting with a bigger cake and working your way in, because I'm gonna cut the edges off so I can clean up the edges and make it look pretty. This is the side you don't present to the judges. Kind of fell apart. You actually can see the layers. It's not super clean, but they're there. And now the final fun finishing touch. Look at that! That looks pretty nice. And now, for the moment of truth. This tastes just like tiramisu. I did it. Mary Berry's tiramisu cake. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe and follow along as I bake my way through the Great British Bake Off technical challenges. Cheers.
It's the Great Taylor C. Baker Show.